The safety of the almost 40-year-old Coburg nuclear power station in the Western Cape is once again being questioned. This comes as Eskom is planning to extend the operating life of the power utility for another 20 years.
Let's talk to you straight.
Africa's nuclear moment has arrived, and almost nobody is talking about it. While global powers continue lecturing the continent about energy insecurity, poor infrastructure, and limited technical capacity, something historic just happened on the southern tip of Africa. South Africa's Coburg nuclear power plant, the only operational nuclear facility on the entire continent, has just secured a 20-year license extension, guaranteeing clean and stable electricity all the way to the year 2045. There was no major global announcement, no media celebration, no applause from the Western institutions that usually demand attention when Africa succeeds. It happened quietly, professionally, and confidently, because Africans do not need validation to prove what they have already mastered. Coburg's extension is not just a South African achievement. It is a continental message, a rewriting of assumptions, a reminder that Africa is no longer asking for permission to operate advanced technology. Africa is already doing it. For years, global analysts confidently declared that an African nation could never operate a nuclear plant safely for decades. They cited unreliable grids, weak institutions, political instability, and a supposed lack of technical expertise. It was the same old narrative recycled over and over. But as those analysts sit in comfortable offices producing pessimistic reports, Africa has now completed something that forces them to update their thinking from scratch. Coburg, standing strong near Cape Town since the early 1980s, has passed one of the toughest nuclear regulatory evaluations on Earth. Unit 2 has been approved to operate until 2045. Not because anyone felt generous, not because South Africa needed symbolic support, but because the plant met every safety, structural, and operational requirement of a world-class nuclear installation. Nuclear regulators do not compromise. They do not give partial approvals. Either a plant meets the required standards or it shuts down. Coburg met them fully and confidently. The review process, carried out by the National Nuclear Regulator, took years. It examined seismic risks, reactor vessel integrity, emergency response systems, radiation containment, steam generator performance, cooling systems, personnel training, and strict compliance with international nuclear best practices. Some European reactors struggled to pass this level of scrutiny. Coburg passed. And what makes this story even more remarkable is that this extension comes just after Unit 1 received its own 20-year renewal. Meaning South Africa did not simply extend one unit, it secured the future of both. Africa now has guaranteed nuclear stability for the next 2 decades. That alone shatters decades of stereotypes. For years, Africa was told nuclear power was too advanced, too risky, too complicated. Yet the continent has quietly operated one of the world's most reliable reactors for 40 consecutive years. Think about that. Coburg survived political transitions, economic turbulence, leadership changes, global energy crises, and shifting policies, without compromising its performance or safety record. Nuclear stability on this level does not happen by chance. It happens through excellence, discipline, and the dedication of African professionals who refuse to let the world define their capabilities. Now the focus shifts to the bigger question. Why does a 20-year license extension matter so much for Africa's energy future? Because it secures 1,860 megawatts of clean, stable, uninterrupted power, the kind of electricity that keeps nations alive. Nuclear energy is not just another power source. It is the backbone of any modern grid. It works when the sun sets, when the wind stops, when droughts hit hydroelectric dams, or when demand spikes at night. Africa has suffered enough from the consequences of unstable energy systems. Blackouts, factory shutdowns, economic losses, and the daily frustrations of load shedding. Nuclear does not bend to weather. It does not collapse during storms. It does not need fuel convoys or international suppliers. It produces constant baseload power, the kind of electricity that keeps hospitals running at night, keeps steel plants operating, keeps data centers stable, and keeps national economies from falling apart. If Coburg disappeared tomorrow, South Africa would instantly lose nearly 2,000 megawatts of reliable capacity, a disaster that would take years and billions of dollars to repair. But with the new extension, South Africa has something priceless: time. 20 years of stability, 20 years to expand renewable energy properly, 20 years to build transmission lines, energy storage, and new power corridors. 20 years to industrialize without fear of catastrophic grid collapse. This extension also unlocks confidence, the most valuable asset in any developing economy. Investors will not build factories, mining operations, or tech hubs in a country where electricity is unpredictable. With Coburg secured until 2045, South Africa can attract industries that demand stability: electric vehicle manufacturing, smelters, green hydrogen plants, data centers, battery factories, and advanced tech clusters. This is the economic domino effect no one is discussing, but it changes everything. And the impact does not stop at South Africa's borders. Because Africa's energy story is also Africa's psychological story. For decades, African countries were told nuclear technology was beyond their capabilities. Too advanced, too sensitive, impossible to manage without foreign oversight. Coburg destroys that myth completely. It proves that Africans can run, maintain, and secure one of the most complex engineering systems on Earth, safely, consistently, and professionally. Look across the continent now. Interest in nuclear power is rising like never before. Egypt is building the massive El Daba nuclear power plant, a 4,800-megawatt giant that will transform its grid. Nigeria is negotiating small modular reactors to power industrial zones. Kenya has created a nuclear regulatory authority in preparation for its first reactor. Ghana, Rwanda, Uganda, and Zambia are drafting legislation, training engineers, forming partnerships, and preparing their nuclear roadmaps. Why this sudden confidence? Because Coburg has given Africa something priceless: evidence. Proof that nuclear excellence is possible on African soil. Proof that nuclear culture can be built and sustained. Proof that Africa does not need to be taught everything. Africa can teach itself. Many of the continent's top nuclear engineers were trained through Coburg or by experts who worked there. When African countries take steps toward nuclear adoption, they are looking not to Europe or America for inspiration, but to South Africa. The irony is striking. The world expected Africa to learn nuclear technology from the West. Instead, Africa is learning it from Africa. Coburg's secret is not the reactor technology itself. The true secret is the people who run it. African engineers, African technicians, African regulators, African safety teams. Every control room decision, every training simulation, every maintenance cycle is handled by African professionals who operate with discipline, precision, and global standards. A nuclear plant demands excellence. You cannot improvise. You cannot skip steps. You cannot postpone repairs. Coburg's workforce has embraced a culture of precision for decades, and this culture is now spreading across the continent. This 20-year extension is more than a legal approval. It is validation. It is a statement that African excellence is measurable, certified, and undeniable, and it positions South Africa to train the next generation of African nuclear professionals, engineers who will build the reactors of the future. Now consider how this fits into South Africa's long-term national strategy. The country's official energy plan, IRP 2025, envisions a massive increase in renewable energy, major investments in battery storage, regional hydropower integration, cleaner gas infrastructure, and reduced reliance on coal. But all of these ambitions have one requirement: a rock-solid stabilizer underneath them. Without stable baseload power, even the most impressive renewable roadmap collapses. Coburg is that stabilizer. Without it, South Africa's energy transition would be endangered. With it, the transition becomes possible. This nuclear foundation gives the country the room it needs to build a modern grid without fear of losing control. What South Africa gets is not just electricity, but breathing room. Room to develop industrial zones, new export industries, renewable megaprojects, and long-term growth strategies without the constant threat of catastrophic load shedding. And when South Africa succeeds at something this technically advanced, it becomes a blueprint for the entire continent. Coburg has now become more than a power plant. It is Africa's declaration to the world that the continent will define its own technological path. For decades, Africa's energy story was dominated by external prescriptions: diesel imports, emergency generators, donor-funded solar kits, and temporary solutions that solved nothing. Coburg rejects all of that. It stands as a quiet rebellion on the Cape Coast, declaring that Africa is not a place for experiments, it is a place for mastery. With a renewed license and a proven track record, Coburg becomes a symbol for African nations preparing to enter the nuclear era. Egypt's upcoming reactors, Nigeria's small modular projects, Kenya's future nuclear plans, and the rising nuclear ambitions of Ghana, Uganda, Rwanda, and Zambia all grow stronger with Coburg's success. Imagine the Africa of 2040, an Africa powered by nuclear renewable hybrid grids that deliver stability and flexibility. An Africa where manufacturing thrives, where mineral wealth is processed locally, where electricity shortages no longer define the continent, where data centers and robotics labs flourish, and where African innovation competes globally without being crippled by unreliable power. Coburg is the first domino in that revolution. Its success sends a powerful message. Africa is not behind. Africa is not limited. Africa is not waiting. Africa is building technologies that many developed nations struggle to manage. And if one African country can run nuclear flawlessly for 4 decades, imagine what happens when 10 African countries master it. That is the question global powers are quietly afraid to ask, and the future Africa is boldly preparing to answer.